Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by AndyMark. Are you competition ready? Go to andymark.com and keep your team inspired. And by the Blue Alliance. Keep up to date on all live and archived First Robotics events and team stats at thebluealliance.com. First Updates Now is brought to you by viewers like you. Fun relies on the generous support of our fans in order to continue to keep creating content. Please consider donating, giving bits, or subscribing. Subscribe for a few bucks a month or for free through Twitch Prime. And don't forget that our subscribers get 5x chance to win on all giveaways.
All right. MSC is always one of the premier events of the FRC season, and this year was no different. With numerous upsets, surprising finishes, and heartbreaking exits, the entire event was a roller coaster of emotions. It was also a year of firsts. All three MSC winners were first-time winners. We had our first winner ever from the Upper Peninsula, 3 first-time MSC chairman's winners, and our first 4-hour field delay. Tonight, we'll be recapping every division in the interdivisional playoffs, doing our FIM season-long top 10 as voted on by you, and then doing some Detroit Champs previews if time allows. Also, Twitch Prime users can get a special discount on bits to help support fun. Get 500 bits worth $7 for only 99 cents. So definitely do that and get your name on that leaderboard up top. Reporting for First Updates Now, I'm PJ.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Allison.
Let's jump right in and talk about the division most people had their eyes on this weekend, DTE. Nick?
Yeah, who are we?
No.
Oh, you guys suck. All right, well, anyway.
I didn't realize that was a special cheer, you guys. I thought Consumers was the only one with a special cheer. My bad.
No,
they were trying so hard when they were filling the time this weekend. So, all right, well, anyway, DTE definitely had a lot going on this weekend. A lot of really good robots, a lot of really good scale robots. So we'll just jump right into it. For most of the weekend, 3707, the Techno Dogs were holding on to the number 1 seed. But right at the end of the weekend, they did lose it to 2337, the Engine Nerds, who took over that number 1 seed after qualification matches. So they captained the number 1 alliance and went on to pick 4362, the Gems from Brighton. This seemed to be a pretty big surprise, though I think a lot of the teams that were on DTE, I don't think a lot of teams saw this coming. But it seemed to be a really good pick overall. Like watching Gems, they were moving really fast. They've been moving really fast all season. They're just a quick bot. They have quick cycle times. And from what I've gathered, it seems like that was one of the big reasons why Engineers wanted to grab them at number 1. So it seemed to work out pretty well for them. That left 3707, the Techno Dogs from Brighton as well, to be the number 2 alliance captain. And they went on to pick 67, the Hot team from Milford. Obviously, no explanation needed there. Hot, always a great team. As Jim Zondag always says, always pick Hot. Seems to be a pretty good strategy most of the time, and seemed to work out pretty well for 3707 as well. So basically, for the most part, we ended up seeing the number 1 and number 2 alliance move on to the finals. It wasn't without some struggle. The number 1 alliance barely almost didn't make it out of the quarterfinals against the number 8 alliance. It actually originally looked like they were going to lose that third quarterfinals match, but they did end up pulling it out. Some other notables, the number 3 alliance of 33, the Killer Bees, and 70 and 5155 lost to the number 6 alliance, who got captained by 54-60 Strike Zone. Strike Zone, it was pretty surprising, I think, for a lot of people to see them fall to the number 6 captain. I think a lot of people were expecting them to be picked before that. They picked 36-56, the Dreadbots. And so they were a really strong alliance. Like watching them in the quarterfinals, like, you know, from 33's perspective, they were just destroying it. Like I think they had 12 cubes on the scale with like 50 seconds left. They were doing an amazing job. So shout out to that alliance. And they gave the 67 and 3707 alliance, who also had 4392, the Deceivers as well. They gave them a run for the money in the semis, but inevitably it ended up being the number 1 versus the number 2. And in 3 really contested matches, they were really, really close. That scale was going back and forth the whole time. But it was the number 2 alliance of 3707, 67, and 4392, taking the DTE division win. And that is your DTE recap. PJ, what was going on the Ford field this weekend?
Well, on the Ford field, sort of your top teams going in were 85, 28-34, 30-98, 35-34, 35-38 for sure, 35-39, and 4003. 2771 actually seeded first. That's Code Red. They selected 4003 Trisonics, who were ranked number 3, and they were declined. So 2771 then picked 3538 the Robo Jackets and 5205 the Full Metal Jackets to round out their alliance, and then they would go on to face 4003's third seeded alliance in the finals. 4003 actually got their number 1 pick after declining 2771 in 3098 the Captains. And then they rounded out that alliance with 2586, the Copperbots from up in the UP. And the third seed would win this field in 3 matches, making me look real silly for how much I sort of disparaged 4003 in our preview show last week and talked about how I didn't find them impressive. But they changed my mind this weekend for sure. So I've got to eat crow and give credit where credit's due. So we had one upset in the tournament as a whole, with the 7th seed actually beating the 2nd seed in 2 straight matches before running into the Trisonics, who very handily, knocks them out of the tournament. But overall, pretty standard fare. The little bit of drama in the picking between the declines, but when you decline and it works out, the drama goes away. So, Allison, what happened over on Consumers?
Well, Consumers, definitely a lot of energy on the field, but looking at the field, don't hate. Looking at the field, like before going to the event, people were looking out for teams like 27, 302, 494, 1506, 1718, 3357, and like 3452. These are all like pretty good teams. And they all played fairly well throughout the qualification matches and all ended up ranking pretty high, a couple of them ending up on the same alliances, and pretty predictable elimination matches. I think most people saw it all coming. Top 4 alliances like wiped out the bottom 4 pretty quickly. But then we had an impressive amount of tiebreakers in the semifinals and finals matches. Actually, every single semi-match and final match went to a tiebreaker game. So it was really exciting to watch and stuff. And then we had, in the finals going in, our number 1 ranked alliance, which was 1718, the Fighting Pie, 494, the Martians, and 3667, the Mechanum Knights. And they were up against our 2nd ranked alliance, which ended up being 3357, the Comets, 3452, the Green Engineers. Oh, did I just flip that? And 6193, Legend of Robotics. So in that match, we had the 2nd alliance actually end up winning it all, and it was a very well-played match by both alliances, and yeah, pretty much that. What about Dow?
All right, so Dow was probably the most predictable finish anybody could have ever imagined. Surprise, surprise, our reigning world champion, Strike Force 2767, seeded first, utilizing their impressive autons and their climb assist, and they picked 217, the Thunder Chickens. Then actually they got a steal with their 3rd robot.
Yeah, how did that happen, PJ? Please explain how that happened.
I don't know. I look at the picks that were made ahead of this, and I don't know how 5907, the CC Shambots, who are like one of the premier Switch exchange bots like in the state, not even in the division. They're like one of the best Switch exchange bots in all of Michigan. And what do 2767 and 217 need? They need a Switch exchange bot.
Yeah.
So why not go out and get the best one in the state of Michigan? Arguably. They're one of the best. And so I was watching it. I was actually over there watching Alliance selections, and I just keep seeing 5907 fall. And they were one of the ones I was looking at because there's certain teams you look at to happen in the 3rd round. And I'm like, oh, they'll probably be, like the 7th or 6th seeded, 3rd robot. Nope. Went all the way to number 1. And so then that alliance just smashed through Ford. Not Ford. This is Dow. They just smashed. they smashed through Dow. They won every match in eliminations by at least 175 points. And most of them they won by over 200. So very little challenge to the number 1 alliance. The fight was to be finalist when it came down to it over on the other side of the bracket. So that was where it got a little bit more interesting. The 6th seeded alliance was one of the more interesting to watch. Captain 3618, the Petoskey Paladins, 910, the Foley Freeze, and 314, Big Mo. Played a super effective sort of switch strategy. Like, not like they played the scale, but they definitely focused on controlling both switches. That allowed them to upset the third-seeded Alliance. And then they took the second-seeded Alliance to 3 matches before losing in the semis. And in fact, the only reason they ended up losing was because Captain 1025 had to take themselves out and replace themselves with a backup bot. And I think that's what caused, because the 6-seed Alliance pretty handily beat them in the first match, and then they weren't able to really adapt when 1025 was no longer in the equation. So that was interesting to watch. But like I said, it was a straight shot, and coming out of divisional playoffs, 27-67, 217, 5907 was definitely the favorite to win Fimstein. But that was not to be the case.
Yeah, so we move into the Michigan State Finals that was on the DTE field. So, I mean, I think a lot of people felt, I think maybe probably myself included, that it almost felt like the finals was happening in the semifinals with that matchup of 217 and Strikeforce against 67 and 3707. Unfortunately, we had to wait a little while to watch those matches take place. For those that weren't watching live, there was about I don't know, what was it? Like 2-hour delay, 3-hour delay.
Yeah, like at least
felt
3.
like it felt like 10
felt like
hours.
forever.
Let's put it this way: I left after divisional finals because I wanted to beat the weather. I was like, "Oh, everything will be done by the time I get home." I have a 2-hour drive home from MSC. I got home and matches had not started yet and did not start for another hour.
It's a precursor for Detroit Championships, by the way.
No, it's not.
Oh,
Detroit Champs is going to be perfect.
Stop.
And everything's going to run wonderfully.
Tyler,
No, we're blaming this on bad weather, okay? There was like a big storm coming in.
And I blame championships on Minute Maid or Detroit Ford Field. Same thing.
Yeah. But no, what it was, there was some sort of FMS bug that was unknown until this point. I tried to talk to a few of the FTAs about it, and they used really complicated words that I didn't understand.
Well, from what I heard, it sounded like they had an FMS update to do, and they decided to wait until lunch to do it after division finals were done. And then they were running practice matches with all of the division winners, as they do. And those all went fine. However, they weren't running real-time scoring during those matches, and something about turning on the real-time scoring when they went to go do the real matches made the system crash. And they had to figure out why. And that was really unfortunate. And then, in addition to that, with the weather that was going on, there wasn't quite the packed house that there normally would be for the interdivision finals. So it was a bit, I guess in that regard, Tyler, you might be right. And maybe we might have seen a preview on how our Ford Field finals could turn out, maybe. But
at least attendance-wise, I do agree
at least attendance-wise.
Yeah.
God, let's hope not FMS-wise. But let's get to the actual action. So like I said, I think a lot of people expected that the matchup between the 217, 2767 Alliance and 673707 would almost kind of be like the finals. And they definitely didn't disappoint. Those matches were really competitive. However, it seemed like the Strikeforce Thunder Chicken Alliance had it in the bag in that last match
especially after because after the first 2 semis matches against them, 67's Alliance had to call it 3707's Alliance. They had to call in that backup. When I saw that they were having to call in a backup on Fimstein, I was like, well, it's game over. No way.
That being said, 3535 played really well for just first of all, they had to sit there for the 4-hour delay and all that. They haven't been playing for the whole day, right? Because they were not an Alliance. So they had to sit there the entire day through the entire delay, and then they pop up in these matches. And they were really playing well, but I really think Strikeforce's Alliance had it. Unfortunately, 217 had a bit of a bad moment on the field, knocking off one of the cubes they tried to place, and unfortunately knocking off, I think it was 3 other cubes or maybe even 4 that were already on the scale, and that moved the door wide open for the DTE Alliance to kind of try to take the win, and that's what ended up happening.
On top of that, it looks like somebody in chat mentioned that in the tiebreaker bet, 5907 was broken and wasn't able to load the vault. So that's why they lost. On top of it is they had nothing in the vault, apparently, which
Which is probably true. I think 217 probably could have switched to doing the vault, especially if that was the case, instead of increasing their lead on the scale with 60 seconds left when they already kind of had it by, it looked like a couple. Hindsight's 2020, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that was
I definitely
unfortunate
think
for that alliance.
Strategy, like, definitely could have been a little bit better. Like, if you look on the far switch of that entire match, nobody was even fighting against this Red Alliance's switch. They had one cube sitting on there, and like that definitely could have been more utilized, and the Blue Alliance could have easily won the match that way. And then if you look at the end of the game, which was like really unfortunate, like it looked like Strike Force and their alliance still could have won, but they dropped their ramp right on that cube, and then they don't get any of the climb points, and it was like, oh my god, like wow.
Yeah. I think this just goes to show, I think it's because we've seen it on Einstein in the past, where if teams have an easy walk through their division, they're not as good at like these. It almost looked like that alliance, like 217, 27, 67. They had never had to adapt in any of their elims matches because they just overpowered everybody. So they weren't prepared to do that.
And this feels like one of the hardest games that I think we've ever had, where it's so important to be able to change your strategy on the fly. And like watching it from like the stands, it's so easy to say, oh, you should just start soaring on the switch instead of the scale. But like, man, when you're down there on the field, like it is incredibly hard to tell like how big the leads are on all three of those devices and at what point it makes the most sense to switch to something else. So, you know, it's easy for us to look at that and say, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. But this is definitely probably the hardest game I think that there ever been, and probably the most important there's ever been to switch strategies in the middle of a match. So, Anybody want to cover the other set of semifinals we had?
I mean, I went in there and I was watching with a bunch of people back here at Kettering, but we watched the match and we were like, okay, like I'm gonna be honest, we all thought that Consumers was gonna wipe out Ford Field. I don't know if you guys felt the same, but like we were looking at the teams. You didn't?
No, because Consumers was the problem with 3357, 3452 is they're both so slow. They're both very precise cube placers, but they have a speed issue. And 3098 and 4003 were just so much faster. So I thought that Consumers was going to get wiped. But anyway, you can continue.
I don't know. Just like from when we were watching, and I don't remember who took the first match, but like they were both like close matches, and then in the tiebreaker, I think like actually all three matches were really close, but I thought Ford really like came out to play, you know, like their strategy was solid and they just like wiped out Consumers. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, they just executed really well, I thought. I think there were some times where Comets, I don't think were driving to the level that they usually are. That's one of the things that's been really good about them this year is just how efficient they are at driving and placing. And it seemed like there were some times in those semifinal matches where they just were not their usual selves at picking the right spots at the right time. Where 4003 was just like whipping in there, and they were, you know, they have that push out mechanism, and they were just like nailing it every time, and it just made the difference. It really overall in Michigan this weekend, it seemed like it was all about who could go quickly but not sacrifice placement in the right positions throughout the match to get that speed. It was all about kind of a balance. Nobody was really going crazy fast in the first 60 seconds and hitting that 6-7 cube threshold early, but they were doing it pretty quick still, but having a nice placement strategy, and it really paid off for most of these alliances this weekend.
Yeah. And then we got to finals, and once again went to 3 matches, and I think going into finals, I had no prediction. I couldn't tell you who I thought was going to win because after watching semis, I knew, you know, anything could have happened. I didn't have a prediction going in, and I was not disappointed by the fantastic matches that were played. Until finals 3 was intense. I know Nick was going to talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, finals 3 was crazy. It was like I know the DTE finals were really competitive, but like this was super back and forth as well. I think at the end of the day, though, that third finals match, it seemed like for the DTE Alliance, Hot just kind of lost their groove. They were driving around a lot. They couldn't seem to find a cube, and then they were dealing with defense after about 30 or 45 seconds, too, that didn't help the situation. And it just got to the point where it was too late to kind of come back. And so that was in Finals 3. That was the last match where they just could not make up that difference. And so, you know, props to 4003 and their alliance and really pulling off the win for the whole weekend.
Yep. And then after, and I would say after, but it wasn't after because during the field delay is actually when we gave out all the awards. So we had our 2 rookie All-Stars went to 7160, the Luddington Obots, and 7226, Error 404. 548, even though they weren't competing there with their robot that weekend, did take home EI, so they will be at Champs. Yep. Then our 5 Chairman's Awards, like I said, 3 first-time winners in 4776, the Scotsbots, 2604, Metal and Soul, and 3641, the Flying Toasters. And then 2137, Torque won after winning it in, I believe, 2015 was the last time they won at MSC.
2137.
What did I say?
You said 2834, Torque.
Oh, sorry. 2137 Torque. And then, so I think they won I want to say it was 2015 that they won it the last time at the state level. And then 2834 Bionic Blackhawks, they were kind of the one everybody expected going in, along with 66, who I was very surprised didn't get it.
Yeah.
But
there was a few surprising teams that weren't able to get in, but we only get 5. So, well, technically they can give out 8, but Michigan chooses to give out 5, and there's only so many teams that can get it. So. All right, well, we're kind of running short on time. We had a lot to cover this week. We're going to move on quickly, though, to our FRC Top 25, our top 10 teams in Michigan from that poll for the week, voted on by you, the fun community. And we're just kind of this is for the whole season. So this is our whole season top 25, and we're going to talk about real quick the top 10 vote getters this week. Any thoughts you guys have on how this turned out for the season?
Overall, not very surprised knowing how the voters generally work. Yep. I'm happy 3707 stayed in. I was afraid that their sort of lack of name recognition, but I think they've been talked about enough this year, and I do think they deserve to be in that top 10 for sure. Yeah. I think 2337 deserves to be higher. I believe Nick said they're the only team at MSC that hit a 3-cube scale, as far as we know.
Chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not hear of a single other team doing it successfully this weekend and getting all 3 cubes on. Engineers did it, I believe, once in quals, and I know they did it at least once in Elands. They might have done it twice. So, they're the only team that did that, and, division finalists losing to the overall finalists in 3707 and 67. So they had a really great robot this year, so I think they probably should have been a little higher.
Yeah. And other than that, I think 33 could probably be bumped down a couple slots. They have played well, but I feel like they've. Sorry, Nick, but I feel like they've been a little too inconsistent.
Inconsistent is 100% the correct term. So yes, I 100% agree.
So that's sort of my thought on 33. Other than that, like I said, I don't think there's any major snubs off the top 10.
Yeah, no. It's just all these teams, almost all of them are pretty famous or well-known teams, even out of Michigan. So to me it just looks like if people were actually at states and actually voting, then I feel like a couple other teams could be close, if not on the list. So
because you've got a bunch of other teams. Like I said, the only 2 non-big name teams were probably 3707 and 3098.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone else is pretty well known, at least for Michigan people. As far as outside Michigan, there's probably a couple. I don't know how many people outside Michigan maybe know about 3357 or 4003. I mean, they're definitely known somewhat, but they had really great robots. So being 4 and 5, 100% makes sense for them, and in fact, they probably could be higher still. So,
yep. All right, so we're running real low. So the one thing I do want to say, just because with Detroit Champs coming up, there's some really good threads going on Chief Delphi about places to eat, people who are trying to give out hotel rooms who don't need them and stuff. So make sure you're going on places like Chief Delphi as you're getting ready for Detroit Champs. Super excited to have you all up in the city. Can't wait. I'm pumped. I'll be there. I think we'll all be there in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so make sure you're checking out Chief Delphi, because I know Chief Delphi is Chief Delphi, but there's actually some good resources going on right now. So I'm going to end. Thank you to everyone who has watched. If you want more First Robotics in your life and like what we do, all that we ask is that you let others know about this show and that this is the place to go for more FRC in their lives. If you got a few bucks to share, we appreciate it with a sub or even buying some bits. But if not, we totally understand and are delighted to have you on board. On behalf of myself, Nick, Allison, and our producer, Tyler, I would like to thank you for tuning in, and thank you to all of our moderators in chat for keeping it civil. Our next show is We the North, coming up in about 4 or 5 minutes. Detroit preview next Monday, and hopefully we'll see you then.